What keeps Star Trek fresh for you? Today on number 372 of Trekland Tuesdays Live. With me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming at you here from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47. And yes, Trekland Treks. Hey, we just celebrated, not a big deal, but I just celebrated the 7th anniversary of my first day trek. And then we had the pandemic in the middle of it all. But yeah, yes, you too can have your own customized, not a group tour, but a customized away mission here somewhere across Southern California, the actual Trek filming locations, quick lunch, best of all, courtier, driven and led by moi, Dr. Trek. We work it out together. It's like a living away mission. It's awesome. We just did one yesterday, kind of an unofficial 7th anniversary. A couple of Trek fans originally from originally from Brazil and Austria who met each other in Dublin. I love Global Trek. Anyway, get in touch with me if you want to see about taking a Trekland trek. If you're watching this later on YouTube, thanks. You can still leave a comment, but maybe you can join us sometimes on Tuesday at 1-ish Pacific, 4-ish Eastern times. And yeah, 9-ish UK time and 10-ish Central Europe. So good to see everybody again. It was funny. I didn't make a big deal out of this, but it was the 7th anniversary of Trekland, my first day tour. Now, I'd done the Geek Nation Tours big tour, and that's coming back again next July, not attached to the Vegas convention, but on its own as a standalone, with a lot more actor celebrity power behind it too. A 7-day major tour around Southern California sites as a group. Alrighty, hotel, bus, the whole thing. Trekland Treks was my way of making it smaller, simpler. Folks who were just had a spare day, they came to LA. You can take a Hollywood suicide tour. You can take all kinds of themed tours around LA. And I thought, you know what? Star Trek fans deserve the same thing too. And it's not like I don't have all the research, all the call sheets, all the obvious ones are there. Sure, Vasquez rocks, but some really obscure places too. Yesterday, we ended up, if you didn't see my Instagram Live, we ended up at Risa, the only time outdoors Risa has ever been depicted. So no, it's a lot of fun. But here's the thing. I think I mentioned I had a couple of foreign Star Trek fans out with us, and we were driving, and we had been up to Vasquez, and Tillman was closed on Monday, but we were at Bronson Canyon. And somewhere along the day, one of them said to me, he said, "Oh, that's so interesting. That's so interesting." And then he said, "But I guess you've said that hundreds of times. You've done this lots of times." And I said, "Well, not hundreds, maybe starting to get to plural dozens." And no, well, obviously dozens. But it made me stop and think. It really struck me how, different perspective sometimes shines a light on something. And he said, the way he said that, he said, "Oh, I guess you've done this hundreds of times." Now, in your heart of hearts, it's like everything we do. There's lots of aspects of our lives that we brushed our teeth a million times. We've made a bed, or hopefully we have. I mean, we've cooked, we've made a sandwich, we've poured a drink a million times, right? But it's true. There's times when even the things you love might get a little old and tiresome. Maybe what else is going on in life makes it that way. But it got me to think, just because I had 45 minutes sometimes to drive when I wasn't talking or I was listening to them, but one channel was thinking about that. What kept it fresh for me? It was interesting because it hasn't gotten boring. I mean, yes, that part of Star Trek for me is a money making. It's income, right? But still, the core of it is, hopefully you've been lucky enough, you've been gratified enough, if not at the beginning of life, at least somewhere along the way, to do a job, to be in a profession that you really enjoy, to have the pieces come together. May not be the most lucrative thing in the world, but maybe you picked heart or enjoyment, over pure money, if you had that option even. And I mean, yes, that's what it is. I have other things that keep me happy too. Will Rogers out at the park, and I'll tell you about something there in a second. for local SoCal folks. But that just that simple line, but oh, I guess you've done this hundreds of times. And I started thinking, yes, like, am I going to burn? I guess if I was doing this every day for 6 hours or 7 hours, I guess, yeah, maybe that would start the burnout. Now, having one a month, not so much, one every couple of months in the off years, in the off part of the year. But it made me think, am I consciously doing something to keep Star Trek fresh for me? Because I don't want to burn out. I remember years ago when I was first doing conventions, and not that I do a ton, I don't have a little actor signed upon it. I mean, that's what conventions and convention attendees think of right off the bat. They don't think of what we do with Portal 47 first, but we're here to catch them when they need to fall into it. And that's kind of the way I am at conventions. I'm here to add to your enjoyment when you've OD'd on all the actors' goodness. And I remember something, though, that Armin said to me years ago. He said he saw something I did at a convention, or he heard me talk, or he did something. He said, that's great, Larry. That's great, Larry. He said, just don't ever get in a position where this is your only income. Like he was basically saying, there'll be a peak, there'll be the boom and bust. And he's like, don't get caught in the boom when it ends inevitably, because everything cycles, as we know with Star Trek. But you in your own life, things have been up, there have been ups and downs. And I always took that to heart. As much as I would just love to get in here and wallow around and find a way to do this, pay the bills, and live long and prosper, I was enough of a realist to know that that wasn't always going to be the case, whether it was on me or whether it was on Star Trek at large. So over the years, and with what we're doing right now, things like this have proliferated to the point where you can take what you have to give the world and offer it, hopefully. And with so many people, that's so many different gifts, abilities, folks who are patient and giving and tenacious are the first responders and the repair folks who are now in Florida and North Carolina, trying to get people back online in all the ways, right? I mean, it takes all kinds in this world. We need all of us to pull together. So if you're in a recreation sphere, so many times over the years, especially when I'd be at my entrepreneur places and I'd be in groups of people who were saving babies, or they're saving animals. They're trying to get housing to poor people. They're trying to help people rebuild their lives. They're trying to help women rebuild their lives, living long and prospering. So many different people trying to do good things, but also make a living at it in an honest way. And all those people saving the world. And here I am doing Star Trek. And I had more than one person eventually come over to me and say, or in the open group talks and say, like, Larry, I may not be a Star Trek fan. Some of them were, but the people who weren't in Star Trek world or even pop culture world. And they said, but I know you must be doing good for some people. Like that's something, if people have a life to get through every day, and maybe they love Star Trek and they don't have Star Trek constantly, they need a little bit of something coming all directions, and you're there to help provide that. You're giving someone a lift somewhere, a relief somewhere, which it was very powerful coming from a non-Star Trek person who didn't know our world. Whenever I get a little down, or I think, what is this? What's the good of this? And I know a lot of you would chime in and say the same thing. So I'm not looking, I'm not looking for an avalanche of emo boo. All I'm trying to say is we all have something to contribute to this world. Something else someone told me once, well, it was my main coach, entrepreneur coach, Melissa, said, the greatest gift we have to give to the world is the thing we overlook the most in ourselves. Often. And that was a thunderclap. That's what made me respect what I was thinking about trying to do out of the gate. I just love that. The thing that we overlook the most about ourselves is probably our biggest superpower, in other words, because we're used to it. It's us. So I offer that to everybody. Coming back around to our tour yesterday, our Trex tour, and I can't remember if it was Wolfgang or York said, oh, but you must have done this hundreds of times. He may have even said, how do you keep it fresh? Or how do you, I can't remember if that was part of it, but I remember that's where my mind went. And it got me to thinking, not just me, but all of us who are fans, whether we are fans who work in the franchise or we work franchise adjacent, or we work in some kind of technology that is Trek adjacent, some profession. Congratulations to Dr. Dave here in our circle. I don't know if he's in the chat today or not, but part of a big team that just launched yesterday. They had to hold up for the hurricane. That's going to be going to study the water on Jupiter Moon, the Europa, which I'm like, wait a minute, that's not the Europa from the Picard. No. Europa on Picard was crude. I mean crude as in CREWED, not CRUDE, because we don't say it was manned anymore. We try to be a little enlightened. Time marches on. But I think about everybody. There are a lot of fans that they're hot when they're a kid about Star Trek, and then life changes. They get out and work. They go through high school. They go through college. They get through their 20s, their single 20s, and they're married. They have kids. Life happens. They have demanding jobs. Maybe it's a moment like some, I don't know, a Willy Wonka moment or something where you can't take it with you moment, where at some point we realize how much of the play has gone out of our lives and how we're working too much, whether it's work paid or it's work at home with families, if as the term is out there now, sandwich generation, where you've got kids and whatever is taking up the must do of your life. It really is important. And in a country, especially America is the most workaholic country in the world. And maybe we've got a lot to show for it. We also have a lot of burned out people, and good on, we don't have to go all new agey with it, trendy wendy, but there is so much to be said for us taking care of ourselves for ourselves, much less our loved ones around us, whoever we're close to. And yeah, we get back around to Star Trek being those, not just that it's the aspirational, inspirational points of it, but just that the ways we enjoy our fandom are just fun. And when you do it with other people, you've got the human connections right there. And you never know, Star Trek is so big that it's a hell of a lot bigger than, I don't know, quilt guilds and stamp collecting clubs. And I love both. I'm just saying, Star Trek's kind of a mass media that you don't know when you're going to be checking out at the grocery store or the drugstore, or you're waiting in line anywhere and you've got a pin on, well, this is so obscure you'd never know, but that's the point. You've got a pin on, you're wearing a t-shirt, you've got a jacket, something, there's a sticker on your book, and somebody says, oh, Star Trek. And I can tell you, 20, 30 years ago, you kind of like cringed a little bit. You were all braced to be found out. You got caught out of the closet. These days, not so much. In fact, it's the way all the big mega brands are going, the big mega franchises. Star Trek is kind of like the little innocent waif back here to a lot of people. They're like, oh, Star Trek. Like they may not have heard all the latest hashing and bashing about, Harry Potter or Star Wars or whatever. But how many times have you been out in public and you've had a little piece of Star Trek attached to you, and it starts a conversation. And I'm going to guess 90% of the time it's either positive or it's at least a neutral. People come at it like, oh, if they recognize it, And if it's an obscure logo, symbol, graphic, and they recognize it, you know immediately that they're not quite as armchair fanish about it as they might let on. Oh, you got that. Okay. Oh, yeah, you recognize the Maquis symbol. You must have watched a little more DS9 than you were letting on. I'm just saying that the years pile up. And my audience isn't exactly Gen Z here. I'd love to have more of the kids in, and we're, reaching out that way. That's what YouTube's for. But I'm just saying that enough fans have lived a little bit of life. A few years have gone through the old EPS system. That the challenge is there. And I say challenge. You're living your life. You're not thinking about it. But for the growing chunk of fandom who have been here, maybe not all 60 years, maybe not 50 years now, but 10, 20, 30 now. It's a question for you. How do you keep Star Trek fresh for you? Now, there's a part of me that wants to say, as long as you don't OD on Star Trek somehow, maybe if you've tried to do a full, binge in one day of Prodigy or Lower Decks, maybe you start feeling a little burned out by then, and you go, "Well, let's hold off here a second." No, I'm half kidding, but serious here. How do you keep it fresh? And somebody might say, I don't have to keep it fresh. It's Star Trek. How can Star Trek go stale? Now, obviously, everybody has their favorites. We're not going to weaponize anything. It's totally fine to say, I prefer DS9 to Discovery. It's perfectly fine to say that. It's perfectly fine to say, I sampled X series. I sampled Enterprise, and the original series, and I just can't get through it. That's fine. There's no contest. No one's going to take your license. No. A gatekeeper may try, but you don't let them, and you can let them down easy, No, it's everybody. You can't help if you've got this many choices now. You can't help but have a favorite and not. Many parents would say they can't help but have a favorite kid. The kid that's the least challenging, the kid that was the easiest one. Doesn't mean you don't love any of the rest of them any less. They're just a little more energy. And I'm talking about kids here, your offspring or relatives, not a show you watch. So don't let me equate Star Trek with that. But it's in that same wavelength, So these are all low topics. We talk about this. We have for ages. When it's an extreme toxicity thing or a gatekeeper, those have all been talked. We all know what I'm talking about. But today I'm just talking about what keeps it fresh for you. Do you even have to think about it? Are there times when you say, whoa, I need to take a break from Trek? I know people that do rewatches. It's great. Sometimes it's a great security blanket to have that show every night, or they'll watch those 2 hours of Trek every night after work or whatever. Have a crazy binging weekend where some of the newer, shorter series you try to watch in a weekend or TAS. So I'm just saying, do you consciously think about having to keep Trek fresh, or does it just happen? Like when my Trek tours takers yesterday said, oh, you must have talked about Vasquez Rocks hundreds of times, and not just the Gorn fight, the Capellans, right? The Mintakans, the shore leave scenes, even Lazarus. What of Lazarus? Makes you stop and think. And something, if you're self-regulating unconsciously, then good. And sometimes we get so passionate we do plunge off. But, I'm not talking about over a year's time. I'm talking about as the years pile up. Because right now we're in a boom time. It's slowing down, but there's still so much fresh Trek there. There's so much fresh Trek I've only watched once. Or I've watched it twice in the same week. I watched it and then I did a second opinion. We prepped something about it. There is so much of the newer Trek that can't compete to watching every episode 30 times like the original series, or 6 or 8 times like Next Gen. It's a diminishing inverted funnel here. So there's lots of fresh Trek that's still very fresh, but we're slowing down. And there's the uncertainties about the industry at large. There's uncertainties about which way Paramount will go. I don't think Paramount will ever let Star Trek die for not for 12 years again. That will never happen. If that happens again, there's problems bigger than what's happening with Star Trek. So I think the potential is there for it to potentially be fresh without worrying a lot about it. I'm throwing that word around, fresh. What does it mean? How am I defining that? Basically, it's like, when do you still care? Not just that you care, but it's motivating you. That you can't go very. If you get to a certain point with your Trek fandom, you see things in Trek terms. You hear people talk, right? You see situations. You want to apply Trek memes and tropes whether it's on the nose from the show or it's all of this. It's the secondary Trek market, if you will. And then, yeah, books, comics, magazines, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just throwing it out there. Not just really what keeps Star Trek fresh for you, but do you even think about it? Again, I don't think, if I had a tour to give every day and I was at the same places over and over and over again, so they're popular. If I went to Vasquez Rocks every day, 5 days, yeah, that might get a little old. What keeps it fresh in that dynamic, though, is I have my part in the equation, but whoever is doing it, whoever the fan is, whoever the taker, who's ever receiving my services, no, who's the other end of the equation? It's like an acting scene when you're giving energy. It's not, actors that live in their own little bubble are not really acting. It's all about the giving. And then when you get to a certain level, you're giving back and forth with the audience in a live performance. That's why live performance, it's a triangle. You've got the other actor or actors on stage, and you've got the audience. But it's that same way when you're a service provider, no matter what it is. And if it's entertainment, if it's a passion point, then you really feel that. If you're, flipping the switch of electricity for people, it's a nice feeling. But it's kind of a distant thing. When you're dealing with people's passions in sports, in their hobbies, in their nerdity. Hobbies is such a 50s, 60s word, isn't it? It's what we grew up thinking before we knew we were in the closet. When you're dealing with people's passion projects and their passions, that's what keeps it fresh. People who work in public service, in politics and government service, in the helping professions, who are really dedicated public servants and professional providers, all up and down the line of all stripes, it's just in them. That nursing instinct, the teacher instinct, it's just in them. And sometimes, yeah, that can get burned out. Sometimes overkill will smoosh that. And that's tragedy, because those people come to those professions. And if we let that happen to them, yes, they're in charge of their own fate, but if the world at large is not cushioning them, and that's what happens to nurses and teachers a lot. Those just came to mind. Firemen, EMS, firefighters, I should say. Yeah, Larry, it's only been degendered since the 80s. On one hand, very lucky to be doing what I'm doing. We're not, I'm not sitting here on my stock portfolio. But I love doing that. It did keep it fresh. I have not burned out doing things like Treks, like doing what I'm doing here right now. And just trying to keep sharing. I know I'm still unpacking things that I put so much stuff away, not just physical, tangible elements, but the memories that conjures up, and the experience and the interactions and all the equations that keep it fresh for me and might bring a new light bulb to anybody else. And I'm just talking Star Trek. Anyway, it was one of those moments where someone says something and your mind just kind of goes, oh, and you just, you know what I mean? Just look. So it's kind of what I hope when I do the show here. When I say I don't want to do the same old, that's what I mean. I have so many folks so many friends of mine doing so many YouTube shows, review shows, and even interviews now. Yay, more interviews, bread and butter things. But there's always, I like to think, if we just take a moment and maybe, go at something 90 degrees off, just to stir the tanks. No, I don't mean Apollo 13's oxygen tank. Not their fault. It was a manufacturing wiring problem on the service module. See, I could do NASA too, ish. That's how we keep things fresh. That's how we keep things fresh. And that's how I like to keep things fresh for you all or anybody watching this later on. I can't do the same old. There's nothing exciting in that. I am not putting myself on the same platform here, but it's the same thing. As much as people loved Next Generation Picard, it's what Sir Patrick is saying when he says, I'll come back and do a show, but I want to do something a little different. Now, maybe sometimes we're a little afraid of that. Maybe sometimes we're a little misguided. Sometimes we're worried about hitting an earlier bar in life. But when we just let it go, and happens oftentimes by the third season, we're ready to do a reunion cast plot line. Yeah, that was a long ways to go for a metaphor that doesn't really exist. Anyway, my question stands. What keeps Star Trek fresh for you? And do you even have to think about it? Or have you got close to those? Or have you had times in your life when life took over and you circled back around? Especially for those of us of a certain fandom duration, I will say. We are still waiting here for another couple of weeks, a week, I guess, for Lord X to come back and we get back into some semblance of a new Trek every week. It's been a long hiatus here. Other things in the world are taking our attention away from us, thank goodness. And thank goodness it hasn't been so crazy that it's been hard to pay attention, right? So here in the States, I was showing this off. I've still got it because I haven't early voted yet. But I got my mail-in ballot or my take-it-by ballot. We got our election package here. Well, there's probably more than one. And wherever you are in the States, I hope everybody votes early. Vote early, vote often. But there is a lot of the events you saw, a lot of the Star Trek folks, and they're still up. Almost everybody is doing, if they're doing anything political, they're doing something for the Democrats, for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I've yet to see any organized Trek effort with Trump. And you all know my politics, but I'm going to be even-handed here, and I think it's a fact. But there's a case if you like doing something that may be nonpartisan, that just is supporting the elections. I just want you to know that this is the third election cycle, I think, for Trek the Vote, which is basically election support, getting people to polls, not for any one character, but also supporting poll workers, even training people to do volunteer work, just to make the elections work. And if you're not familiar, they've had a couple of events. They're actually Trek the Vote for Fair Elections back around. The original founder, Tay, had to back off this year. I'm just saying they have some events still going on. Some. If you look at Trek the Vote, I know we're counting down. We're like at 3 weeks to go. They've had some special events, and some of their events they've partnered with other people in different parts of the country. They had an info session, postcard writing. There's a Texas poll monitor training, which is a position at every poll in Texas that Chase is part of. That's coming up this Thursday at 7 Eastern, 6 Central for folks in Texas, and 4 Pacific. That's for folks basically in Texas, but they're lending there's a voter outreach phone bank just to get people to go vote. It's not in support. It's a paired up effort with Common Ground, which is another organization, just people to get more people to go vote. That's coming up a week from Thursday on the 24th. At 6 Pacific. Anyway, go to their site, and then on election day, on Tuesday, November 5th at 11 Eastern, which is 8 Pacific, John Billingsley is joining in. They're partnering with Fair Count, and it's just a thing to get people to go vote. It's national, but like if people need a ride to the polls, and one of the campaigns hasn't exactly done it, it's a nonpartisan, help people getting to vote, or making sure if they've got to register the same day. So yeah, I'm leaning in here. I know this is all U.S. and American. That's where most folks are. But they've got some videos up. Robbie McNeil, John, Chase, Picardo, Tim Russ. But Fair Count is one of the group's partners. Scrutineers is some volunteers and people who are helping train poll workers, that kind of thing. Pizza the Polls is a nonprofit that just gets people pizza waiting in long lines to vote. You know, again, nonpartisan in the states where you can do that. And Common Ground, the Texas Civil Rights Power to Vote. So anyway, there's a lot of things that are ostensibly nonpartisan. If you want to put your energy into something like that, especially the closer it gets to election day, that's there. They got a little late start this year, so I'm trying to do what little I can do to help boost the signal. Trek the Vote. Once again, I would love it. We're in the time of year when it may be winter everywhere else, but we still have good weather here in SoCal. It's a perfect time to take a Trekland trek with me, your customized away mission day tour, 4 sites, and a quick on-the-road fast food lunch so we don't lose any time. About 6 hours, although sometimes we run over a little bit. We concierge you, we chauffeur you. It's pick up, drop off wherever you are in greater SoCal. But the best of all was we've worked it out ahead of time. Hopefully no surprises depending on the day and time and all of that. Get in touch with me if you'd like to. This is, though, where we've got to thank our Patreon folk. Yes, I got to say, hey, everybody, I want a big thanks to my Patreons, the TTL Club, right? Chuck A., James Kerwin, Diana Hopkins, Jesse at Crusher Convo Podcast, Lawrence Todd, Halbeard Gunjansson, Glenda Bruton, Andrew Dzimski, Josh Patton, Pranakasha Productions, Chris Jiggins, Keith Rombach, and Comedy Forecast. And our live wires, Robert McLean, Byron Bailey, J.R. Poole, Alan Hoenzi, James, David Gregory, Greg Wigstrom, and Casey Shafsky. Now, I will do the reset at the end of the month. You've got to the end of the month. Here's the thing. It's a very simple. Literally, it's $5 and $10 a month. Patreon.com/TreklandLive. For a shout out, thank you so much for the support. I keep it simple. The $10 TTLers get access to our early day, the first 3 or 4 years of Portal 47 behind the scenes interviews, conversations, revelations, those recordings. And I need to update you guys. I know it's been a long time. I need to do that. As soon as I get this crazy time, we will do that. But you can do it too. Go and you can be in for this month and pop up next month. I really, really, really do appreciate it. Coming up here, I'm thinking we're going to have 1 and maybe 2 guests in coming weeks. So make sure and try to be with us here on Tuesdays Live. And of course, if it's a Tuesday, that means it's another Trek Files. Now, who is, oh, yes, Paul Lynch, who is, maybe some of you saw him at Vegas. He directed 5 episodes on Next Generation and on DS9, among a big litany of a career. But he had the unique position. I don't think it was, we've trying to figure out if it was intentional. He directed the first normal episode after the pilot for both TNG and DS9. So he directed The Naked Now and A Man Alone, even though A Man Alone was shown second, right? Paul Lynch is our guest on the Trek Files. Love for you to go over there. TheTrekFiles.com is the new home on Memory Alpha, where you've got the whole 12 seasons are archived in database now. You can actually grab them, and they all have the documents of the week as well as a little player, audio player right there, and the hot links to get you back inside Memory Alpha. Most of all, here we are on our socials. Yeah, I'm still on Twitter X. We'll see. I've got so many followers there. It's a good platform. Larry Nemecek, but Facebook and Instagram. I did some lives yesterday from the tour, from our trekking around. Hope you enjoyed that. And portal47.net. Oh, YouTube. If you haven't subscribed on YouTube, what's stopping you? Please. We got a late enough stop. I appreciate all the help and support and sharing there. That's going to do it for us. If you're watching later on YouTube, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. It's right there. And then maybe, again, you can join us live on a Tuesday. All right. So if you're leaving us now, please stay healthy, do all the things. There's different viri out there floating around. So take care of yourself, would you? Stay woke. Check the sources. You all know how thick it is out there. Those rubles go a long way. And trek well, everybody.